For 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate having 5 minutes, but I wish I had a lot more. I would like to get the information that Ms. Blackburn asked for earlier in regard to the money as it flows to the state and local levels as well, so when you report to her, if you could make sure I get a copy of that, I would greatly appreciate it. I'm going to need some yes or no answers because I have to fly through this because of the time limitations that we do have. But GAO noted that SAMHSA officials did not initially include any of their suicide prevention programs among those that can support individuals with serious mental illness. Isn't that true, Ms. Hyde, yes or no?
I explained why, yes.
And SAMHSA explained to GAO that the suicide prevention services it administered were not limited only to individuals with serious mental illness and served a broader population. That is also true, isn't it? Yes.
It does serve a broader population. And
at the subcommittee's hearing on suicide prevention held last September, the chief medical officer of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention noted that in more than 120 studies of completed suicides, at least 90% of the individuals involved were suffering from a mental illness at the time of their deaths. And I thought I heard you say earlier that you agreed with that number. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And my one concern there is that, of course, we had the 10%. Would you also consider that 90% to be serious mentally ill? Yes or no?
I don't think researchers think that that's all serious mental illness as it might be defined in a functional level.
But it's pretty serious when somebody ends up dead.
Absolutely. That's why we had the conversation about whether to include it.
And after further discussion with GAO, SAMHSA included its suicide prevention programs among those that can support individuals with serious mental illness. Isn't that also true?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
I can. After further discussion, you then submitted the suicide prevention programs among those that can support individuals with serious mental illness, even though earlier you had not included them because you thought it was a broader audience. Isn't that true?
We were trying to understand
yes or no?
What GAO wanted, yes.
Okay. And DOD officials initially identified all of their suicide prevention programs as supporting individuals with serious mental illness. Do you think that there might be some institutional bias on the part of SAMHSA in favor of dealing with mild as opposed to more severe behavioral health conditions that make it more difficult for SAMHSA to recognize and act upon the unique nature and impacts of serious mental illness or serious emotional disturbances?
Goodness, no. We were trying to be honest and fair about the answer to the question.
All right. And I appreciate that. Here's the reason that I am so concerned on these issues. And while I recognize that you all have said previously that it's getting better, but it's not fixed, I do appreciate that. I was what we call in our neck of the woods a street lawyer for many years. I can still see the eyes of the mother who dealt with, while she was a client of mine for years, her paranoid schizophrenic son who ultimately committed suicide. I can see a former client standing in the courthouse with his son crouched on a bench because he was back into the court system, not the mental health system, but the criminal court system yet again, and not knowing what to do. I can see the faces of the deputies as they started to go out of the building to deal with a fight in the parking lot, a verbal fight in the parking lot of the courthouse, where a son and a father were having a verbal altercation after a hearing in the criminal court system, and I had to advise the deputies to back off because of the mental illness of the son. He would have a violent reaction to the uniforms, not to the individuals, but to the uniforms, but he would not be violent with his father, and they agreed to do that. And then my wife, who continues to practice law, although I have come here now, last week was dealing with, in the juvenile system where she is a practitioner and a substitute judge, dealing with a child who attempted suicide, having a serious emotional disturbance, learning that they couldn't deal with one plan that the hospital had come up with because he hadn't been hospitalized twice in the last year. He'd only been hospitalized twice in the last 13 months. And when I said, are there questions, I have HHS and SAMHSA coming in, are there questions I should ask about what we're going to do about this child who is someone I know and who may very well end up being successful at some point if we don't do it right? I said, are there questions I can ask? And her response was, no, they don't have anything to do with this. I ask you, do you believe that you all need to be coordinating to such an extent that experienced practitioners in law would know that you have something to do with it when there's a suicide attempt, or that there might be a program to help? I asked those questions. Nothing came back. And I noticed in your report that you had something on the Garrett Lee Smith Youth Suicide Prevention Program listed in the study of the GAOA study. And I texted my wife and I said, any of the contacts related to any of the cases you've done in juvenile court for the last 16 or 17 years, have you ever heard of this? Answer's no. So I present you with this indictment, and I hope to get some response at a later time, because my time is up and I yield back.
Thank you. Now recognize Mr. Tonko for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.